All right, hey y'all, welcome back to Catalyst Small Talk. It's Pastor Philip. It's been a couple of weeks. I hope you all survived the end of the school year well. Maycember is what we call it here around the church office, at least. It's been nuts for us, and I know it's been crazy for you all. And so I'm excited to bring back the podcast, and we're going to be doing some more weekly things for the summer to bring nourishment, to bring enrichment to you all, as you all have the great important task of raising teenagers. And I want to introduce to you our summer youth ministry intern, and her name is Izzy Miller. And Izzy is a wonderful person. I've enjoyed getting to onboard her for the past couple of weeks, and we're just super excited to have Izzy on board. Back in January, I had this dream and this vision for what it could look like to have a youth ministry intern here for the summer, and thanks to your generosity as a congregation, we were able to raise our budget to have funds for a youth ministry intern this summer. And so I want to introduce Izzy again. And so Izzy, just tell me a little bit about you, where you come from and how you got here.
Hello, everyone. If you haven't met me or if you haven't heard my voice, at least you now have heard my voice. As Philip said, my name is Izzy. I am from Cumming, Georgia. I went to West Forsyth High School, and then I went to Samford for my undergrad, go Bulldogs. So then I was in Birmingham for a little bit, and I did a biblical studies degree there. And now I am at Columbia Theological Seminary, which is in Decatur, and I am doing an MDiv, which is Masters of Divinity, which is like a 3-year program. It's like a catch-all for all things ministry. If you want to do anything in the church, for the most part, you got to have an MDiv to do it. So that's what I'm doing right now. So in this program, I have to have an internship in order for me to get the degree. And I actually don't think you know this story, but yeah. I was grasping at straws, basically, to try to get an intern. I tried so many places. Things were falling through. And I even got offered a position, but for some reason it just didn't feel right. Like, it just didn't sit in my gut the right way. And I turned to what everyone does when they're panicking, looking for any sort of answer. I go to Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely, as one does.
And I posted, hey, looking for a summer internship. These are my credentials, kind of thing. And somehow or another it got to Philip, and we connected, and it just felt so right. And I think from the moment that we sat down, it felt like this is where God wanted me to be in this season. So that's how I got to Johns Creek.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we're just so thankful that you are here. So in talking with you, I know you grew up at a church around like this area, and you were involved in the youth group. Tell me a little bit about your experience in your youth group and why that's important to you.
So I think when I look back on where I am now, I would not be where I am if it wasn't for my youth group. So just incredibly foundational in my spiritual development. And I think it was those big things like the mission trips and the retreats. But more so, I think it was the consistency of having a place to go on those Wednesday nights, on those Sunday evenings, on those Sunday mornings. And I felt like I belonged in the church from a very young age. And I think that formed me into who I am. So I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for my youth program.
Absolutely. That is awesome. So you talked about being in seminary, getting your Master's of Divinity. That's always a fun word.
It is a good one. Yeah, that's why I'm saying MDiv. MDiv.
Yeah, divinity is one of those words that can be a tongue twister sometimes, and we're going to leave all this in. So getting this MDiv, is there a particular focus that you want to work on with this degree? Anything you want to look towards the future with?
Yeah, so I will say the really cool thing about this MDiv, which is you learn everything. You take just about every class. But if I had a favorite thing that I think that I would pursue, in the future, maybe PhD work, it would most definitely hands down be Old Testament / Hebrew Bible, which is the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just have a heart for the Old Testament in kind of a really special way, so.
No, that's awesome. Is there a part of the Old Testament that you lean towards? Because the Old Testament, it's broken up into different sections. Because you've got the Pentateuch, which is like the first 5 books. You've got wisdom literature. You've got the major prophets. You've got the minor prophets. Mm-hmm. And so what about the Old Testament stands, like which part do you gravitate towards?
Yeah, so I think when I first started this journey and first started discovering that this Old Testament thing is pretty cool, I will be honest with you, I can remember times that I sat in church as a little girl and my pastor at the time would be preaching from the New Testament. And I actually would have preferred to just flip back to Genesis and Exodus and read my little kid adventure Bible and read the Old Testament while I should have been listening to the sermon. Yeah. And I think from that point, like, you know, I think maybe I was just born with the love of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
So I started getting really into the first 5 books, which is the Pentateuch. Genesis and Exodus are foundational for me. But most recently, I've really kind of grown an admiration for the major prophets. I like the minor prophets, but you know, like Elijah and Jeremiah and Isaiah. A lot of that stuff, but really it's all my favorite. And if you asked me what my favorite Old Testament book was, I don't think I'd be able to answer.
No, that's awesome. And so something that as I'm thinking about something that's off the cuff, because spoiler alert, little like peek behind the curtain, Izzy and I are sitting in my office while we're doing this. Why do you think it's important for teenagers to have a grasp of the Old Testament? Because I think sometimes, like, we as a church, like, yes, we focus on Scripture. It's foundational. It's like the crux of our faith, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think we, as a church universal, like, we lean heavy on the New Testament. And I think sometimes we're a little afraid to get into the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And so why do you think it's important for teenagers to have those experiences with the Old Testament?
I think that, well, there's a lot of things that I want to say. I actually did my senior year of my undergrad. I presented a paper at a convention arguing the necessity of the Old Testament for discipleship.
Okay.
And I think it goes back to you miss so much when you don't know the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. Especially for teenagers, I think there's this awful stipulation or understanding that the God of the Old Testament is different than the God of the New Testament, as if there's been some sort of character shift for God. But if you actually read the Old Testament, that's not what you find. Yeah. Yes, you have those passages that are hard to get through. No, I don't expect, a 16-year-old to sit down and read through the genealogies of Numbers and come away changed.
Those are always fun.
They're good. But what you do have in the Old Testament is you have Psalms, for example. Just about every emotion that a teenager probably will experience is in Psalms. Yeah. You have heartbreak. You have romance in the Old Testament. You have people finding purpose. I mean, if you'll let me get on my soapbox here, like Moses through his whole lifetime struggles with identity and who he belongs to. Yeah. Is he an Israelite? Is he an Egyptian? He's in all of these foreign lands. And I think there's a lot of places in the Old Testament that actually exemplify what it's like to be a teenager today that is missed because we see kind of this, oh, well, God is the God of, anger or wrath, or when it's just not the case. You see grace and mercy from God in the Old Testament. And I think that's one of the things that makes me so excited to be as passionate about the Old Testament that I am, is because I see in church pulpits and in curriculums in the church where things from the Old Testament are getting missed and looked over because people aren't willing to wrestle with it. So that would be my short little answer.
No, and that's incredible, because I do think too that, again, like I said, there's this, like I said, you said too, like the stipulation around the Old Testament that we're not always the best readers of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And we're not always willing to engage with I think sometimes the rawness of because I think about Joseph, I mean, his family freaking abandoned him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so being able to, like, you know, sometimes teenagers feel abandoned.
Yeah.
Sometimes teenagers have these things where they feel like they're alone, and time after time, like we see through the Old Testament, through different things, that like God continues to lead and be with the Israelites in the midst of the chaos that they were going through. God was with the prophets when they were trying to figure out, you know, these people have been exiled out of their land when the kingdom of Babylon's, or when the Babylonians came in and just like took over and made like Isaiah and Jeremiah necessary prophets for the northern and the southern kingdoms. Right. So to shift gears for a minute, the theologian Frederick Buechner, he says the place that God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. So kind of two-sided question. Where is your deep gladness? And what do you see rather as the world's deepest hunger right now?
I think I can't answer this question and not address what I've been talking about this whole time.
Yeah.
For me, this question is similar to something one of my mentors used to say to me growing up was, the thing that you're supposed to do is the thing that keeps you up at night. Like, what keeps you up at night?
Yeah. And
I think I started this whole like biblical studies journey because I saw that people leaders in the church, they don't know how to read the Bible. They don't know the Bible. They're not studying or in the Word, and they're not, I feel like there's a lot of, as far as biblical studies is concerned, especially in the churches, from my experience, it's very stagnant. And that's the stuff that kept me up at night, because I'm learning all this stuff in class about God and the Old Testament and even the New Testament. And I'm like, if we could get a congregant or congregation to jump this hurdle, even though it might be hard, dealing with especially the Old Testament, like I wonder the type of fruit that it would bear. And so that's what I'm working towards. I'm working towards a place where the academics of biblical studies and ministry cross over, and we have a more biblically literate, church.
Yeah, no. And I think it's incredibly important. I had a professor in seminary, and she actually taught New Testament, but her thing was with the entire scriptures, the entire Bible, of how do we be good readers, but how do we also understand contextually, like what's going on in the passages that we're reading, like the world of the text, the world in the text, the world behind the text, and being able to, again, be good readers. And it's a lifelong journey, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I think as Wesleyans, we always talk about this, going on to perfection type idea of God is always encouraging us to grow in how we experience God through our scripture reading. Yeah. And I think too that always wanting to grow in that area should be of high importance for us. Yeah,
and I think one of the ways that helps me think about that is thinking about wrestling with our salvation. I think it's in Philippians. And then also the passage in the Old Testament where Jacob is wrestling with God with this. And I think today there's a lot of people that are scared to wrestle with Scripture. But I think if I could label what I want to do for the rest of my life, it would be to wrestle with Scripture. Yeah. And then, another thing that, especially what you were saying about your professor, I think one of the things that people don't realize is the Old Testament was the Bible that the disciples and Jesus would have known. Right. So in order for us to understand what's going on in the New Testament, I mean, there has to be this background of the Old Testament. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So one more practical, and then we'll get to the fun questions.
This is fun. What do you mean? These are fun questions.
No, the more lighthearted questions. So, how are the parents that are listening to this, or the youth listening to this, how are they going to be seeing you this summer? What are you going to be doing around here?
I mean, just about anything. If you don't know where I am, ask Philip, and you will know where I am.
No, absolutely. So you'll be teaching Sunday school?
Yeah, I'll be in Sunday school. I'm going on the high school mission trip. Mm-hmm. I am doing Braves game. I'm doing the game nights. We're doing the pool nights. I'll be here every Sunday doing Sunday school. So if you're youth and you're thinking about going to Sunday school, you should. This is a shameless plug. You should go.
Yes, absolutely. If you're around 9:45 upstairs on the 3rd floor on Sunday mornings, it's going to be a great time. It's going to be
so fun. You'll miss out if you don't come.
For sure. All right, some lighthearted rapid fire questions. What's your favorite movie?
So, my favorite movie of all time, and by that I mean the movie that I could watch over and over again and never get bored, is Dirty Dancing.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of my favorites. I don't know why, but, I also love, like, How to Train Your Dragon and Princess and the Frog and, Yeah.
What about your favorite TV show?
This one changes a lot.
Or maybe what like right now?
Right now, I'm really into New Girl.
It's such a good one.
It's my first time watching through it. So I'm experiencing a lot. I'm really into New Girl.
Yes.
I loved Hannah Montana growing up though. So I have a special place in my heart for, pop stars on the Disney Channel.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Because that whole like Zooey Deschanel connection.
Yes.
Maybe like a favorite musical artist or band.
So fun fact about me, I love early 2000s like alternative music.
Ooh,
so I grew up listening to Green Day like nonstop. That was my favorite. And then but like in my middle school, like my band girl era was like 5 Seconds of Summer.
What did you play?
What did I play? No. I just loved listening to bands.
No, I'm with you.
Now
okay.
I am self-taught guitar.
Okay.
Doesn't sound very good, but I have one.
Yeah.
I loved 5 Seconds of Summer. That was like my first secular concert.
Okay.
So it special place in my heart.
Yeah.
The All American Rejects, that's up there. Grew up listening to my dad's iPod shuffle. So a lot of like 80s rock.
Okay.
And, so yeah, I mean, I listen to everything. Right now, I'm really into Benson Boone, which is like not an alternative, but I love music. So I be listening to a lot of it.
Awesome. And then your favorite ice cream flavor?
This is probably the hardest question because, spoiler alert, sometimes you get prepped with questions, and this was one of my prepped questions, and I was stuck between 2 flavors, and that is Neapolitan.
Okay.
I love strawberry and chocolate.
Which is actually 3 flavors.
Actually 3 flavors. I'm cheating a little bit. But then I also love a cookies and cream.
Yes.
I don't know if you guys have ever, this is a Izzy hack, but if you get the Publix brand cookies and cream ice cream, I swear to you, they don't even cut up the Oreos. Like, it is whole Oreos in the ice cream. Like, I recommend that if you're an Oreo lover.
That's fantastic. Awesome. So, on the way out, anything else you want our listeners to know about you?
I am really excited to be here. And this is new for me. All of this stuff is really new for me. So I'm excited to learn and get to know the kids even more. And please come to Sunday school because it's going to be fun.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm throwing one at you. If they happen to see a strange man with you,
yes. I can't believe I haven't mentioned this at all. It's like my personality.
If they see a strange man with you on some Sunday mornings, who might that be?
I have the pleasure of marrying someone very soon, actually next year. So I'm engaged to a man named Hunter Bean, Bean. Please feel free to call me Mrs. Bean if that's easier to remember. I love it. And if you can call him Hunter, Mr. Bean. He's really nice. Obviously, I'm marrying him, so he's really nice. Yeah. And so if you see him following me around at worship, that is the strange man.
Yep,
so
absolutely. Awesome. Well, Izzy, thanks for your time, and I'm really looking forward to a good summer.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here.
All right, so we will be back next week, and I hope you all have a great week and enjoy listening to this after a little bit of a hiatus, but we're excited to crank out some content, as the cool people say. So anyway, hope you all have a good week, and we will talk to you all later.